Hi, Camilla. Welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here.
Yes. Hi. Welcome for having. No. See again. Hi. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. My work and how I got into it is that I started doing it as a master's student. I think in the US you say a grad student, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking for a job to help me get started into doing research. I had always been super interested in thinking about how technology impacts society and politics because I'm a student of political science. And then the opportunity arose to work at the Weizenbaum Institute and specifically to start working at the Data Workers Inquiry. At this project I've been a part of for 3 years now. And it was just a great coincidence of facts of my interests and of the job being available and just getting started with making an amazing idea into a real research project. And the Data Workers Inquiry, it is a community-driven participatory research project where we look into the AI industry, more specifically into the data work industry. And I'm just going to define data work here really quickly because not everyone knows what it is. Data work is all of the labor that goes into collecting, creating, organizing, annotating the data sets that are used to train machine learning systems, AI more broadly. So all that goes into making sure that the data sets are clean, that they can be processed and understood by machine systems, but also just infusing them with meaning. The example I always like to give, is that if you want to train a system to identify cats in a photo or dogs and cats, you need a bunch of cat and dog pictures for the system to be trained on, but it's not enough to just have the pictures. You need to have the pictures and have them annotated. So someone will go in and draw all of the boxes around all the cats in the pictures and mark that section as cat or dog or non-cat and non-dog. And that's data annotation. So it's a process of putting meaning, intelligent, human intelligence into data so it becomes useful for training AI systems.
That's a beautiful analogy. I love it.
Yeah, because the cat image is very useful. So in the Data Workers Inquiry, it is very participatory and very action-driven because we invite data workers from around the world to lead research projects, to research with us their own experience, their own working conditions, their own environment, and to lead research into their own workplaces, to define which are the most pressing topics, the most interesting topics, to guide the direction of the analysis, the target audience, the target message, but also to articulate demands for improvement, for better labor rights enforcement, for better conditions in the AI industry more broadly. And our role is to guide and support as best as we can, to offer a platform, to offer a safe space, some research training, and we also organize events. We facilitate interviews and conference participation because we want to support workers taking charge in changing the world.
Interesting. As you mentioned, you have like all these community researchers, which I feel like is like a really, I don't know, not very common thing. How has your experience been finding those researchers and working with them? You all also use a lot of different mediums like cartoons and videos. Yeah, can you tell me more about like the unique approach to your research?
Yeah. So the Data Workers Inquiry, it was not my idea. I need to give credit where credit is due. It was born from the experience of our lead researcher, Dr. Milagros Micheli, who had been researching data work for, I think, 6 years before she started this approach and started fundraising and writing a grant proposal and everything. And her experience was very frustrating at some points because she was finding really scary levels of abuse and exploitation in this industry. She was writing about it, researching it, even getting prizes for her research, but she just kept seeing the exact same things happen over and over again. And the second thing that she kept seeing was herself and other researchers involved in researching labor just in the position of going somewhere, talking to people, getting knowledge and insights from the field, as we say in academia, writing about it, and a lot of the benefits just not going to the people actually struggling in those situations. So the idea was to radically change that, to really embrace the talk of critical science, of decolonizing academia, and just do our best creating a form of making science that is truly participatory, that distributes that distributes the benefits of research a little bit better, and that is also just not shaped only by the interpretations and the worldviews of the people doing the research. It was born out of a desire to do eye-to-eye research, or it's not one research and one research affiliated with a German institution going somewhere and then deciding what those things they see mean. And in this new methodology we created, we have a paper where we write for a very academic audience, like the methodological considerations that went into going this, the epistemologies and all that. But at the end of the day, it is our best attempt at trying to empower workers to interpret their own realities, because they already know, they are doing the interpretation. And to your question about the different media modes, it was born a lot out of the workers, actually. We were expecting to have a lot of reports or surveys done, but at the end of the day, a lot of the workers said, I want as many people as possible to know about this work, to know that it exists, to know that this is the work that goes behind artificial intelligence. I want to reach a very broad audience. I have no interest in writing something very analytical. I want to write something for everyone. And the choice of medium reflects those goals that are also goals of their activism. Because know that doing this work, especially in this industry where basically every single data worker has signed a non-disclosure agreement and is bound to not disclose their work, doing this work comes with risks. So see, in this industry, most data workers have signed some sort of non-disclosure agreement. They're not allowed to talk about the work that they do, who they work for, how much they're paid. It varies a lot, but most of the non-disclosure agreements are very extensive. And talking about it and doing this research with us comes with risks. But we work specifically with people who are already organizing, who are already involved in activism, who are already incurring some form of risk, but also who have a very clear purpose and mission. So we try to not put everyone at risk that doesn't know about the risks and who is not willingly taking some risk to improve their work, their lives, and their co-workers' lives.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And drink some water. That actually ties in really nicely to the next question I was going to ask. So I found out about the data workers inquiry through an article that you all published called Behind the Faces of AI. And it followed these data workers. I think it was maybe Clara and B, who worked for a social media company. And after reading that, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, more people need to know about this. And so I don't know if I think I saw your name on that paper, but I don't know if you could tell me more about like Behind the Faces of AI and like cases like that.
So it's a weird situation with authorship because the authors are Clara and B. They did the research, the writing, they did the coordinating with the artist who did the illustrations, but we are credited as organizers or editors of like the larger Data Workers Inquiry project. I'm not sure this is very important for the podcast, actually. Okay, so Clara and B, they are two French data workers, and they did work for a social media company, but they were never actually employed by a social media company. they were working for an outsourcing company, which is a very, very common thing in the AI industry, that the work gets outsourced. It's either intermediated by a platform, like what we would imagine, like those delivery platforms that we all know from getting food delivered, where people are not actually employees.
Okay, yeah. So
So
if you have like DoorDash or Grubhub, those people are
yeah,
employees of those companies. They're
they're
contracted out.
contractors, yes. So this
Cool.
contracting out through platforms happens a lot in the AI industry. The other most common mode is that people are employees, but of a third-party company, and they're doing something for a social media platform, for AI firm, but the chains of accountability and the chains of employment are always kind of separated. Sometimes we have an outsourcing company that outsources to another company, and it's very difficult to keep track of who's responsible for what or who is doing work for whom. It's also very hidden because of the non-disclosure agreements. So if you notice this Behind the Face of AI comic that we have, doesn't mention the social media company because the workers are not allowed to say who they were doing this contracted work for.
Yeah.
What was your question?
I was just wondering if you could kind of explain the article more. I guess in my interpretation, it was saying like people were using this social media platform and in their heads they thought they were talking to like a chatbot that seemed maybe more private, but in reality they were talking to these data workers. Is that like a correct interpretation?
Yes, probably.
Okay.
So, like I said in my long explanation, the accountability chains are very difficult to track. You sometimes don't know who you're doing work for, and more often than not, you don't know what it is being done for. So those two workers in France were doing were they were receiving a lot of tasks where it was reply to this conversation, to this prompt, as if you were a chatbot. So they were impersonating an AI. You're a human person being asked to write, think, produce an output that looks like a chatbot. That can be, and that's where a little bit of uncertainty comes, but it can be that they were just simply replying to chats or comments as an AI, and users were seeing that and being told an AI has written that when in fact it was a human person. It can also be used for that and simultaneously as training materials to optimize and improve how the AI outputs things.
Yeah.
Very unclear.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the workers themselves don't always know if they're talking directly to users as an AI, if their outputs are being used only as training materials. The most probable scenario is that it is both. We also have another piece with Michael from Kenya, who was doing similar work of AI impersonation, of replying very quickly to chat messages. And in his case, it was in very intimate topics and contexts. So, to the best of our knowledge and as a result of his analysis, he figured out that he was actually talking to people the whole time who did not know they were talking to Michael from Kenya. They thought they were talking to maybe some sort of sex worker, probably intimate chat. Maybe they thought they were talking to just a regular person in a chat room situation. In that case, there was absolutely no disclosure. In both cases, actually, no disclosure that any human involvement exists to either the users, the consumers, the people buying that service. All of those workers were under very strict instructions to never reveal that they are human, that they are doing this, that they are who they are.
Wow, that's crazy. That's so sad. There's so many questions from there. First of all, I imagine that has like a really profound emotional impact on the data workers, to be so like private. I mean, chatbots are expected to be on like 24/7. You know, you go to your computer and you type to them. Is that expectation the same for data workers? What are the hours like? What are the typical like working conditions for a lot of these people?
So in that situation of AI impersonation, you can see that really well in the ending of Behind the Face of AI. the chatbot is on 24/7, and it might seem that you're talking to the same entity the whole time, but there's no guarantee that you're talking to a robot the whole time. Sometimes a person will take over if the system encountered some error or can't process a specific message request, and a person will swoop in without you knowing. But also another person might just step in right after the individuals who were talking to Michael just kept talking, thinking it's always the same person, but actually it was 3 data workers who had changed shifts in that same time. That just to
That's
add
so
a bit.
scary.
And it's a lot of work to like, you have to not only pretend to be a machine the whole time, which is deeply, deeply dehumanizing and alienating, right? You have to pretend to be a machine, and you have to like, you can get bad marks for being too human or for being too much like a machine, because the systems are being tuned to be a great chat partner, right? So you can get penalized for being too human or too little human. It's a very, very complicated balance to keep. You're absolutely right. There's expectations of speed and accuracy that are very high. As to the working hours, a lot more than me, a lot more than it's usual. So again, this differs a lot depending on whether people are employees or if they're just contractors on a platform, because it also, if you're for data workers who are contracted by platforms, they get paid by task, not by hours. So they have a lot of incentives to work as fast as possible, to do as many tasks as possible. Might not be on task for 10 hours, but all of the time that they spend in front of their computer are like setting up alarms and waking up in the middle of the night because bing, there's a new task and you don't want to miss out on it. They might not be working formally as defined by the platform the whole time, but they're on the whole time. And for the people on BPOs, the hours tend to be very long, but they're not, even if they're not absurd hours, if people are working 8 hours, it's still extremely stressful and extremely demanding work, because you have to be fast on every single answer. You don't get to spend 4 hours crafting emails carefully like some of us might be used to.
Yeah. Wow. This is a side note, but I got to work on a project last summer that did, I believe it was called like Wizard of Ozing research, where you like make a fake chatbot and then like interview users. On one end, there were people like pretending to be the chatbot, and I remember like it was really stressful for the researchers to keep up with the pace of the interviewer. So like the researchers were pretending to be a chatbot, and the person being interviewed was interacting with them. Like and that was like a 30-minute study. So like I'd imagine doing that for 8 hours would be exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in Michael's case, it was also an emotionally draining work too, because it was not chatting about, oh, what time does your business open? It was chatting about intimate topics. It was sexting. It was keeping the other person engaged and active and emotionally invested in that conversation. It was pretending to be a whole person with feelings and preferences. And sometimes just he would receive a chat that had been going on. They had to quickly read over what has been said, what personality am I right now, and come up with things to say that fit that personality. You were asking about the working hours and how it looks like. We have quite a few pieces that touch on that. I would recommend the report by Alex Chavez, where he goes into the weird and exhausting working setups that people arrange, where they really wake up at 2 a.m. to start working and make day out of night to stay in tune with US working hours, because that's when most tasks usually come out, even if they are in India. So they change day for night. Oscarina and her little animation video talks about how workers will gather in WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups to keep each other posted. And in her little video, the figure that represents her is in the supermarket shopping, but there's a very good task that just came out. Let me rush home to get to do it so I can get some good paying tasks because that varies a lot.
Totally. I have some more questions on the data workers themselves as well as the companies. You mentioned the emotional impact of having such like intimate conversations with another person. I feel like that's really interesting because I mean, a lot of people I know maybe like trust chatbots more than they trust like close people and like teachers or relatives or like humans because it feels more private. And so I'd
Mhm.
imagine the information that they share with these chatbots or data workers is very personal information. Are there other examples of like content that data workers have to engage with that's really like emotionally disturbing? And then while answering that, could you touch on the company policies around that? Like, is there any recourse for workers
Yeah.
who engage with a conversation that they don't feel comfortable with?
Okay, this question is really good because it lets me say something important. We've been talking about AI impersonation, and that is absolutely something that exists and that happens, but it is not the only type of data work. Like sometimes it happens that you think you're engaging with a chatbot, and in fact, there's much more human interference than we might imagine. But it also happens that you're engaging with a chatbot that is a technical system and there's no human involvement at that level. But that doesn't mean there's no human involvement with the AI. Every single AI system needs to be trained on data and all data points to be useful. There's a kind of a maxim in AI development that your system can only be as good as your data. So advanced
Yeah.
AI systems need data that is organized and clean and annotated. So data work is always involved in that. And that lets me segue into other types of data work where people might engage with disturbing data, which is a very big, very, very big market. Also, a big chunk of our projects deal with that, which is content moderation. And content moderation, again, has a little bit of a dual function because when content gets moderated for a social media platform, for example, it is, in fact, being reviewed. So if you go on Instagram and you see a post that is really violent and disturbing, you can flag it and you can report it. And it will often get reviewed by a person. So when they review it and say, oh, this is according to the guidelines or not, that content gets taken down. But content moderation also has a second function, which is to train the automatic systems, because a lot of the content get that sorry, a lot of gets flagged and taken down is done by automatic systems, which need to be trained. This is
Yeah.
an AI, not a chatbot, like we've been kind of conditioned to think of AI in the last 2-3 years, but it is still an AI system, an automatic filter. And those need to be trained and they need to be constantly updated. And for that, you need, again, data that has been annotated and categorized into violent, disturbing, nudity. For all the policies of our community guidelines, as they're usually called, of social media platforms, there needs to be data that has been labeled as this violates it so that the systems can flag it. And all that labeling of disturbing, graphic, violent, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, animal violence, all of that needs to be flagged by content moderators. And that is deeply disturbing work.
Yeah.
I can't really say how bad it is because it's just beyond words to describe what it does to a person spending 8 hours in your big office environment where everyone is reviewing war and violence. And that's just your job. And you have to go through one piece of content every 10 seconds because that is the performance level you have to maintain. And you have to maintain at 90% accuracy. So it's not enough to just flag it as inappropriate. It has to be like accurately reviewed into the correct category and correct policy. I'm happy to send over a few examples where workers themselves try to talk about the experience, and more importantly, talk about what it does to their health, physical and mental, to do this work. It's not good. Not good. Fasika has made a very impactful report that has gotten a lot of attention, where she talks about people who got into abusing drugs and alcohol and into self-harm as a consequence of this work, and also as a consequence of social media platforms and outsourcing companies to offer proper protections, to offer proper training, preparation for engaging with this type of content, which is probably very intense, very long training and preparation, to offer sufficient professional mental health support during working hours, after working hours. It is a policy. It is a choice to not offer this and to let workers suffer the consequences alone. Yeah, a lot of the pieces we made with content moderators go into this because it is truly a crisis.
Yeah. Thinking back to like my own experience and my friend's experience with maybe like sensitive content online, I know that anytime, like the rare occasions when I have seen stuff that should be flagged, it's like deeply emotional and like I think about it for the rest of the day. And so like having to face that every single day for multiple hours.
It stays with you. Reading the pieces, a lot of the pieces we have developed and the workers have written and made on content moderation, they still have trigger warnings because just engaging with the experience and the trauma that emerges from this work can be very tough on readers and viewers. Yeah. There's also a gender dimension to this. I'm sorry.
But it's so interesting.
Ranta, who is she was a content moderator in Nairobi. She made a very beautiful zine where she just collected stories of herself and her colleagues, all of them women, all of them mothers, and documented and collected. Like it's a collective storytelling project of what it does to a woman also, because a lot of the violence online is against women. So there's a special vulnerability that comes with that. A lot of the women report that it also impacted so much how they view their children, the level of anxiety they have with letting their kids go to school or to outside, because it hits closer to home sometimes. Yeah. I can't recommend enough because it's important that we know of this, that we know what needs to be done for social media to be kept working.
Totally. I want to touch on the policy a bit because you keep mentioning it and like how it's important that like companies, countries, everyone has policies around this. Really quickly, just to like finish painting the picture, would you mind going into what companies have these data workers? I know that we talked about it a bit, but in some of the articles I read, it was like large social media companies, Amazon, whereas in other articles, or you also mentioned smaller contractors do this type of work. And then where are data workers? Because I think from your project, it seems like they're like all over the world, but like, what are people interacting with content that is produced in the countries that they live in, countries far away? Yeah.
It's a lot of questions. What companies are there? Blank statement. Any company developing an AI system has data workers. They might be buying data sets that are already annotated, but they have been annotated by data workers. But all of the big tech companies that are developing cutting edge AI systems, they are also needing cutting edge data. So all social media companies that have any sort of content moderation, which is all of them, all of the big tech companies developing AI systems, all of the car companies developing self-driving cars, which is also like you need to teach cars, automatic systems, how to view things. So that's also a lot of data work. Yeah. This to the first question. The second question, where are data workers? Everywhere. They are a lot, concentrated a lot in the global south, because again, as a matter of policy and company choice, there's a purposeful choice to contract out this labor for as cheaply as possible. So it gets done as quickly as possible, but with very little cost. It's a very, very undervalued position. Data workers are paid badly. They're paid badly in absolute terms. They're paid badly in comparison to how much expertise goes into doing this work. But it takes a lot to be focused, precise, to know all the policies, to understand the annotation guidelines, do it precisely. So there's a lot of know-how in this, which is absolutely not valued. And they're also paid extremely poorly. If you consider that AI is a trillion-dollar industry that is changing our world, and it's like the future if you listen to all of the companies doing it. So that is important, and that is something, if I may already do a little bridge to looking forward. It's something that we should all be very worried about, because if we are truly on a path for AI to revolutionize the world and take over, then the companies doing it and the companies who will be so much more powerful than they already are, they are showing a preference for terrible respect to workers' rights and paying people pennies for their efforts, which, if we are truly in this path, is going to affect all of us. Like, it's drawing out tendencies that are might possibly just expand to everyone else. So it is important for everyone, even if you're not doing this right now. And you had another question regarding who is working on what data. You hinted at, are they annotating data that is closer to home? Yes, a lot. There's also a language component to this. So if a company needs data in English, they give a preference to native English speakers as a matter of accuracy and quality too. And there's also a concern with AI that's very general and that can work in many languages, where there's a need for language-specific, dialect-specific data, particularly for content moderation. There's also a lot of contextual factors that might go into flagging a content as racist or not racist, as violent or not violent, where just the contextual knowledge is absolutely invaluable for the proper functioning of systems, which again is something that's not reflected in the pay of the people doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh my gosh, you said so many interesting things. I want to keep this under time, and I'm trying to think of where to go. Kind of like a burning question that I've had is, mentioned that this could affect more people going forwards. I know that a lot of people talk about how like a lot of the data sets that are used to train AI models are like kind of running out, and like AI companies are looking towards like synthetic data and stuff like that. Do data workers ever get paid to produce data? Or like, if okay, so like, is that mostly just like produce training data? Like, would they ask a data worker like, oh, can you write essays for us or film a video for us? Or is it more like what does that type of work look like? And could more people be going into those fields?
Yeah, data workers absolutely produce data. There was, I don't actually have the links for that, but there were a few pieces that came out on people producing training data for those automatic vacuum robots.
Roombas?
Yes. So people got really weird tasks where they were asked to upload pictures of poo, and then people like data workers who are all quite smart would like take one piece of poop and like take many different pictures from many different angles with different illumination levels, with different image qualities, and that's data production.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you need your robot to not run over poop, because that would cause a lot of problems, right? And that needs to be trained. There's some more concerning tasks. A lot of the data workers I've talked to report that at some point or another, they're asked to upload pictures of IDs, pictures of faces, pictures of yourself with hats in different illumination levels, where you can quite easily know that it's being used for facial ID technology or just creating databases with IDs. And a lot of data workers are uncomfortable with those tasks, which is also why they tend to be better paying. But that's another form of data production. Synthetic data, I don't actually know a lot of, but synthetic data is never like, there's no type of producing things, producing outputs and products that doesn't involve human labor. So if synthetic data truly is the path for the future of the AI industry, there's still someone doing it. There's someone checking if it's too close to real data. There's someone checking if it's like, if it makes sense, because synthetic data that's just gibberish is not very helpful for a system that you want to be contextually aware, precise, engaging. Then it might turn into a data work industry that's more geared to verification, to checking, to verifying if the data is good, or verifying if the outputs are believable or not believable. That's also a type of data work that often gets outsourced to users, because every time you interact with ChatGPT or whatever your favorite large language chat AI is, and you have the option to say that was a helpful answer or that was an unhelpful answer, you're also giving data back to the companies, which can be used to keep refining and retraining the AI systems.
Totally. I guess transitioning more to policy, are there any, obviously it's like a very big field, but are there any policies that you think companies or countries should take to help protect data workers?
Labor rights
Sorry,
for the win. That's no, I think the European Union had a very interesting law, which they're kind of phasing out slash trying to not apply as much for the AI industry, but it was the supply chain something, supply chain directive, supply chain.
look it up
It
and
doesn't
I can
matter.
include it. Yeah.
It was basically saying that companies need to pay attention to the supply chain of their products and make sure there are no human rights and labor violations happening. So think banana plantations, where we know previously there have been a lot of human rights and labor violations. That law was supposed to make sure that any products containing bananas coming into the European Union and being sold in the European Union were not the product of those bad conditions. And it was an attempt to honestly think about what it takes to make products. That's an approach where I think could be very productive for the AI industry. Just asking how is it made, and please make sure there's no labor violations in the process, which to me is so reasonable, but it's surprisingly controversial. There's also a lot coming from data workers and workers in general who are organizing, who are fighting for better conditions. The Data Laborers Association, which is an association in Kenya with whom we are partnering and supporting for a longish time. They have, for example, developed a code of conduct that companies can commit to, a code of conduct that reflects their experiences as workers, what they think would improve their working routines and daily lives, and could be adopted and followed by companies. So there's a lot coming from the workers saying exactly how they think it could be made better. Kauna Maui, who also partnered with us, she's a psychologist, and she has started an initiative, a mental health initiative for data workers and content moderators. She has developed a program based on her own experiences, on conversations with colleagues and former colleagues, where she is working to healing people and to collective healing of the traumatizing consequences of having done content moderation. So I think companies could learn a lot from that initiative. They could partner with Kauna and build out her program, test it, implement it more widely. And lastly, I would like to mention the International Labor Organization's Convention on Platform Work, which is set to be voted in June, and which would very crucially make it much easier for platform workers to be recognized as employees. That would also be huge, because if you're not an employee, you have much more restricted access to labor rights and social protection. So that could be game-changing, and I hope it passes.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a beautiful list of policies. Doing all of this work for a while, have you changed any actions in your personal life because of it? As in, like, do you not use certain platforms, or are you more aware of what you share and, like, more reserved maybe?
I am definitely more aware of what type of data I put into social media, but I'm also constantly on Instagram Reels, so there's limits. I definitely feel a lot of tension and conflict about being on there somewhere. I have become much more aware of how little violence and disturbing content I see on social media, with a hint of gratefulness that other people are saving me from that. I have become a little bit of a hater of AI, which is just to say, not that I think is the worst thing ever. I think we have invented worse things, but I think I've developed a skepticism where you hear an announcement about X or Y or Z new AI product, and I just keep coming back to the question of, first of all, how was this made? Because I still haven't heard from a data worker who doesn't have concerns or points out serious problems in the data production and collection sphere. So, well, this amazing AI product, what's the cost of making it? Who suffered for this? But also, like, what is it for? I think that's a good question for all of us to keep in mind, because honestly, talking to ChatGPT is fun and all, and it's impressive, and it has a lot of wow effect. But what am I gonna use it for truly? Yeah, I have become a little bit of a hater.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that it can be, especially with your understanding of the human side behind all of these platforms, I think that it makes a lot of sense to be skeptical of like what we're actually using things for and the value that they bring us and if it's worth it.
Yeah, and especially like the big future claims that those things are going to change the future. I guess a lot of my skepticism comes from I don't really see the vision yet. Like, I don't see how the products we have today will become the crazy revolutionary thing that we're being promised. But also, if this is truly the future and the most game-changing invention of all of human history, shouldn't we take more care into making sure we're making it on a solid foundation of sustainable, decent, fair working conditions? Because if we're going to become so dependent on it, aren't we setting ourselves up, or isn't the AI industry setting humanity up for another cycle of exploitation and violence, which seems like a bad choice to make?
That seems like a perfect ending. Wow. I guess I had a question about like young people, like if there's one thing you wish that they could take away from this. Actually, I could. Oh yeah,
I already have one, a great one. Unionize, organize, protect your rights, and also stand in solidarity, truly in solidarity, not just, yeah, it's bad, thoughts and prayers. If you see data workers campaigning, spread their word, support them. In your unions, create paths for collaboration and for collective action, for fighting together. There's a lot that can be done. Let's use our young people energy for good.
I love it. Oh wait, I want to keep asking you questions. What's okay, last one. What is one thing that gives you hope in this field, if
Just
anything?
seeing how much energy and hope data workers bring into their collective fight. They're exhausted, they're tired, they're badly paid, but they're getting together. They're sitting down and thinking, what could make our work better? And just not giving up in the face of trillion-dollar industries is inspiring. And I'm super proud to say that I support them with my research. And yeah, that I want to keep doing more. So that gives me hope. Doing something gives one hope. I think there's a lot of power in movement and in action to keep us on the path for change. Being a hater is not the most productive thing.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for doing this interview. I've loved having you on this show. I'm so excited for our listeners to hear this and learn more about data workers and all the beautiful work that you all are doing at the Data Workers Inquiry. I really appreciate your time today. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you too. I just want to shout out once more to all our community researchers who embarked on a crazy research action journey with us, who make this possible.